Um, Welcome. I'm hoping you can all see that me and myself, Josh, who is my NAPC consultant, is joining us today on the webinar. I'm hoping you can see the Ask Us in front of you.
Yeah, I can see that. I can't see.
That's lovely. Okay, so we're going to make a start, and what we're going to do is we're going to have a good overview of everything about an annex. Now, we would normally run a poll at this time, but unfortunately, we've no poll to run for you today. So please help us to help you to understand everything that's annex, and at the end, we'll have an open forum for some questions for you. Okay. So if you're ready, we will make a start and we'll go through the agenda. So we're going to go through the introductions. You'll see on screen my colleague Josh as well as me. And we're also going to cover what is an annex and how different is it to a garden room. What does an iHus look like? What are the benefits of an annex? What about annex planning permission and council tax? Joss is the specialist on there, and she's going to be able to give you a lot of information in that perspective. And then we have the build process, which I'll cover. We'll talk a little bit about annex life, and then we'll have open questions at the end of the webinar. And if a question pops into your head while we're going through the session, please pop something in the chat. We'll answer your questions that you put in the chat, and we look forward to hoping you enjoy our webinar. So we're going to make a start, and what we're going to do is we are going to talk about the difference between an annex and a garden room. Now, essentially, an annex is a timber-framed bungalow in the garden, whether it's a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, or even a 3-bedroom. It's a self-contained living space. So it's got the kitchen, shower, bathroom, bedrooms, living space, dining area. It's built within the grounds of an existing dwelling. So it's built in what is known as the curtilage of your property. It must comply to building regulations. And that's a big thing for iHus. We comply with building regulations and building code on all of our buildings, whether it's built under one set of planning rules or another. And we'll go deeper into that shortly. It must have a functional link to the main dwelling. So it's got to be linked to the main house. And it shares the access and the services with the main house itself. So power, water, drainage, driveway are all shared. It's the same build quality that you will find in modern day bungalows. So there's lots of different values that are respected now, which are the R values, U values for buildings. And we are above the requested building regulations. We over-engineer our buildings greatly. So that's an annex. So what's the difference between that and a garden room? They aren't designed to live in. A garden room is normally under a thing called permitted development. It can be no more than 2.5 meters high. And it's normally a garden room, a gymnasium, a place where the family may gather. And it's classified as incidental use in planning. So it's not something that's a habitable dwelling. And that's the difference between a garden room and an annex. An annex is a habitable dwelling that can be lived in 24/7. It has a lower ceiling height because of the restrictions I've just mentioned to you about it being no more than 2.5 meters high. In your standard homes, your ceilings are around about 8 feet, which is 2.4 meters. So if the roof of the building can't be no more than 2.5, you end up with scooched ceilings. You can't sleep in them without planning permission. Now, there's a lot of companies out there who are explaining that they do garden rooms and annexes, but what they try and put across to you is they'll build you a garden room and then after a few years reapply to have it changed, the change of use to make it an annex. Well, we have a lot of customers come to us who've gone down that process and have had that fail when it comes to readdress planning. So it's not really the most cost-effective way to do it. And we have had one instance where a client built a garden room, went into to change the use, to change it to an annex as a livable dwelling. The council served a 28-day notice to have him remove it, or they would remove it and charge. So it's not really the best way to follow that process. So what does an annex look like? Okay, so we've got some images here on screen. I hope you can all see them well. You'll see that we've got quite a few pictures. There's 6 pictures in all, and the top left, well, this just gives you how diverse we can do what we do. The first top left image is one in Cornwall, and that image is of an annex that's been raised up on stilts. So any engineering, building engineering that's required to build the annex, that's exactly what we do. Now, this client has got a phenomenal view over the Cornwall coast. They wanted the dwelling to be on the same level as the rest of the house. So the only way to do it was to put it on stilts. The other option, obviously, would be to dig into the ground and put it on a lower level field. But that was not as cost effective as actually raising this building on stilts. Difficult one to get through planning, but we have a planning department that has got tremendous success, currently running at 94% success. So that's key to what we do also. And then we move on to top right. Now, this is an unusual build. In the area, we had to keep the vernacular of all the other properties with this. So it was requested that we actually used aged oak. So this is aged oak that the rest of the area is within the green belt and conservation area. So they wanted the buildings to match. Although it's a modern build, you can see the solar package that's been put on the roof of the building. They wanted all of the builds to fit in quite neatly. Then we move to the centre. And if we look at the centre left, you can see that we've got quite a nice annex build there. This is a build that comes off a barn conversion. This is, again, an area where we have a little bit more difficulty in gaining planning permission for this build. And this build is, again, as you can see behind, we've got grade 2 listed buildings in the area, and we're connecting to a barn conversion. So this one, when we talk about planning, and we'll be talking greatly about a standard householder planning permission and a thing called the Certificate of Lawfulness, where we comply with Mobile Home Act. You can just, if you can just see, there's a little faint line above where the centre gutter line is, and that's where we actually join the two halves together for the Certificate of Lawfulness bill. So middle right, we've got quite a modern building with a lovely canopy overhang. This fits in with the vernacular here again. This one is in a new estate where there's a lot of new designed buildings, so we complied with that. Again, nice build, very spacious build with a nice sail over canopy. Another thing that we can achieve. And then if we go down to the lower images, you'll see how the interiors can differ. We tend to be bespoke on all of our builds. So we've got quite a bottom left, we've got quite a modern layout in the annex, and then we've got on the bottom right, we've got the chic cottage look and effect, and that cottage effect is very popular with a lot of the pitched roof builds. As you can see, we've got vaulted ceilings in there rather than a flat ceiling. My colleague Joss will also she'll give you a few points on what I mentioned there on the centre left image about how difficult it can be in certain areas.
Yeah, that's it. I think obviously you can see there was a barn, I think it was barn conversion in the listed building there, but sometimes we find in these areas of sort of quite high planning constraint, there's other ways around it, like Nigel mentioned, the Certificate of Lawfulness. So yeah, I'll go on to talk a bit about that in a bit.
That's great. Thanks, Joss. So now hopefully you've all either downloaded a brochure or you've actually received a hard copy. And what I like to point out here, these are images out of our brochure. showing a 1-bedroom and a 2-bedroomed annex. And what I like to cover on these images of footprints, you can see, and this is what you'll see throughout the brochure. You are not set on the models that are in the brochure. Every single model that we build is bespoke to our client. It may be that you want to move the bedrooms around. It may be that you want to have the windows in a certain place. These images and what goes through the brochure are our core images. So they're there to give you an idea of size, space, and what you can attain inside your annex. We have specialist rooms for certain clients. They'll ask for a 2-bedroom, but the 2nd bedroom could be, in one instance, it's for kidney dialysis for somebody who needs a treatment room. It may be that we just need a room for studying, or it could be a room that's used for being a seamstress, or it could just be a reading room or a snug. There's lots of things. It doesn't have to necessarily be a 2-bedroom annex. It could be a room that's used elsewhere. Now, just to give you a few pointers while you're actually looking at these images, on the left we see the Bawtry, which is our starting point throughout our range. Now, if you can see the kitchen at the top right, you can see there's a door that enters into the bathroom. Now, just to give you a perfect example of one I've just done recently for a client, I've moved that door that enters the bathroom into the bedroom to make it an ensuite. And that also meant that I could give them an even bigger kitchen than we show on that standard build. So everything's bespoke built, everything's designed to suit your requirements, and it's also designed to suit your tastes as well. You can see the bottom images, you can see there's a pitch roof version there, dark grey exterior and anthracite coloured windows. There is lots and lots of different choices for you to make. Moving on to the 2-bedroom. Again, this is our most popular annex in the 2-bedroom range, which is the weekly, giving a great sized kitchen, living space, dining area, 2 good sized bedrooms. This one's showing a walk-in shower. You can have a shower, you can have a wet room, you can have a bathroom, and also you can see beside that there is a small utility too. So you are now looking in the realms of a 2-bedroom bungalow. Now, what do I mean by that? If you were to buy a new bungalow today, if you went to Redrow, Wimpy, all of the new modern builds, your footprint would be 56 to 62 square meters. The weekly starts at a 60-meter footprint, and then we have a weekly extra and a weekly extra plus, taking the size and dimensions up. Now, size and dimensions are critical to what we do and how we do things. With a 0 VAT rating, we can go 20 meters by 6.8 meters. That's the maximum size. Now, that is the footprint of a 4-bedroom bungalow. There's not many people have got the garden or require such a large building. Anything to add, Joss?
I think just the great thing about obviously an iHus is you're essentially starting with the shell, and then you can build the inside as you want. Just a quick thing on the size as well is obviously from the planning point of view, the bigger you go, the trickier it can be sometimes to get through planning. So we always do an assessment of your site first, just to sort of comment on the sizes that you could go to.
Yeah. What's unique with iHus and the relationship we have with the NAPC, which Joss is one of the senior consultants there. One of the things that are important is that as we go through our process and you wish to take a next step further and look at having one designed for yourselves, what Joss and the team do is they do a preliminary planning report to look at the viability of having an annex on site. Again, something that's very important. No point going further down the line. But also we have a lot of customers that are actually looking for a property to own that they need an annex in as well. So even before you bought the property, if you come and speak with us and we consult through you, we can get you that preliminary planning report to see if it's a viable place to build an annex before you purchase the property. Okay.
Yeah, that's it. I was just going to say sometimes as well, you know, you may be thinking about a couple of properties and which one may be better for an annex, and we can obviously advise on that as well, which is quite handy.
Very much so. Thanks, Joss. So what's the benefits of an annex? Well, we've split this up into 3 different areas: care, social and financial independence. So care, we do a lot of research into the cost of care homes in today's marketplace. And we do know that we're looking between £9,000 and £12,000 a month for primary care. Can be a little less if we're looking at intermediary care. But the long-term plan for the family, and it's a much better alternative to a care home, is having the annex. It retains a lot of the care costs that you may be having to shell out. And building the annex means that you're close by to your family. Still doesn't stop you having carers in the annex to assist, but it will keep that cost down. And also you have the benefit of the annex for the future, and the value of the annex and what that adds to the future value of your property. In a social aspect, we're going to be playing your video a little later on. The family that you can see in the background, the Hortons, this gives you a perfect scenario. Jenny was living 160 miles away from her family. She was unfortunately now on her own, and a lot of her friends had passed away or moved away, and she was quite lonely. So she decided that they were going to have an annex built at her daughter's property so she could look after the grandchildren, be close to her family, and start a new life. And that's exactly what she did. She opened a Thursday club, she has a book club, bridge club. She's like the pillar of the community now. But it means that she started a new chapter. She's helping the younger generation look after the even younger generation, and it does help them with their work commitments because she's there to assist. So that's a good key point on social, and it just gives everybody a new lease of life. The financial side of it is also important. It does mean in most cases that, and I would say around about 80% of our clients have a property to sell so they can fund the build of the annex. Now that's something that we deal with all the time, and we assist with our clients all the time. But that does mean it releases the funds and the equity from the house. So the family, you can see your family enjoy the money that you're sharing with them. It means that you can share that time with them as well. But that financial independence means that not only does it boost your pension fund, and just because you're building something that's got very little maintenance. That's the whole idea of our way of building annexes. Little maintenance and easy to keep clean, and wipe clean surfaces, and lots of things that make the annex very unique. But it does mean that those minimal maintenance costs, it means you're sharing overheads and trip down to the shop. Well, Josh is going to mention something because we discussed this a couple of times now. Josh is very, very green, and so are we as a company. I don't mean green as in round the gills. I mean green, being very environmentally green.
Yeah, no, I think just the sustainability side of obviously having an annex on site, living as a multi-generational family, as Nigel touched upon, sort of sharing lifts at appointments, the supermarket, you're essentially reducing your overheads and also, time in the car, things like that, reducing your carbon footprint. The other thing that Nigel, you mentioned was that they're really well insulated and they've got great U values. And I think because they are built using such sort of modern construction methods, they're so well insulated, and you've got a lovely warm family home, and it reduces your energy costs. I think I saw the EPC that got released the other day, Nigel, and it's
That's
like
right.
top of everything.
Environmentally, we hit the A rating. We're just under the A plus, which is fantastic. And not only that, if anybody has any knowledge of build, which is very very important that you understand that, there is a thing called a U value. All modern houses must be built to a restraining value of 0.29. Okay, so just to reiterate that, they must come underneath that rating to be signed off by building regulations and building code. Just to prove how over-engineered we are with our insulation and ventilation, our roof space is 0.18, the living space is 0.16, and the floor space is 0.18. So we are way over-engineered from everybody else. And that also means that we comply with the Part L regulations for ventilation and insulation above and beyond. So thank you for raising that point, Joss. Yeah, so it's a very, very important part of what the benefits of the annex are. It's not just having somebody close by. It's about keeping your home running costs, your power, your energy supplies as well. Okay, we're going to move on to planning permission. Now, this is where my esteemed colleague takes over, because she's forgotten more than I know. I don't mean that sincerely, but she's one of our senior planning officers through the NAPC, and she's going to go through planning nice and easy, so you find it easy to understand. Over to you, Joss.
Thanks, Nigel. So yeah, as Nigel mentioned, we are NAPC, and our team work with iHus and also all their planning aspects, and we manage their planning applications. Now, the one question we get asked quite a lot here is, do annexes require planning permission? And as Nigel mentioned earlier, quite often you can build out buildings under permitted development, but as soon as you add in that permanent living accommodation into an outbuilding, this requires planning permission. And working with iHus, we apply for this permission for the annex in a couple of ways. So we've got your traditional sort of household planning application route, and then we've also got this certificate of lawfulness for the siting of a mobile home. Now with iHus, we apply for a dual application. So we actually submit both of these applications at the same time with the council. Now, using this route, we find it has a really good success rate. They work really well, like alongside each other, and I'll talk a little bit about that in one of our case studies later. And I think Nigel mentioned, I think we've got about a 94% success rate at the moment, so it does work really well. First of all, if Nigel can move on to the next slide, I'll chat a little bit about the household planning application. Now, a household planning application, you may have heard of this. It's how you get permissions for things like extensions to your building, anything within the sort of grounds of that curtilage. And the household planning route gets permission for the building, the use and the siting of the annex. How we do this, so you will work with iHus on your plans for the annex and come up with your final design. They will give us the drawings, and then there'll also be a little personal statement there stating sort of the need for the annex, whether it may be for an older relative, or we quite often see applications coming through at the moment for the younger generation as well. And we just provide a planning statement to go in with the application, which assesses the whole application against sort of the local planning policy. So every local authority will have a planning policy document, and sometimes we find they may have actual policies about annexes, and we can draw on sort of any local precedent in the area. There's similar applications, and we find that sometimes really helps sort of bolster the argument. Now, when we submit the application with the local authority, there's a consultation period where your neighbours are notified, and so are sort of statutory consultees. We always say it's probably worth speaking to your neighbours perhaps before an application goes in, just so it's not such a shock when they receive sort of a letter from the planning authority saying what's going in the garden. It's always good just to have that conversation with them. Statutory consultees are also notified in this time, so it may be you might be in a conservation area, you might have a listed building, so they'll have the opportunity to comment on the application. Throughout this sort of time, we'll always monitor the responses that come in, so if there's anything that we need to sort of go back to with the council, we can do. We always try and build sort of quite a good relationship with the case officers at the council. I think we've pretty much worked in most of the councils across the UK now, so sometimes we even come across the same ones, and we sort of know how they work and how they know how we work. So yeah, we can iron out any issues or concerns they may have throughout that application process. Generally, we find applications take maybe around 8 to 10 weeks once submitted. So there'll be a validation period where they just check the council have got everything they need to sort of assess the application. And then if then there's that consultation period, they'll assess it sort of between weeks 5 and 8, and then they'll reach a decision. Usually annexes there are certain conditions, sort of standard conditions that I put on annexes. So that's things like that it can only be used in an ancillary way. So that's what attaches it to that main dwelling. The council won't sort of want to see you renting the annex out to you know, someone in the local village, or using it as a separate dwelling. So it's got that ancillary link. They will condition that. One thing to note in this household planning application route is that the annex must be within your residential curtilage. Now, if you have a large garden, you might have a paddock next door, or you may have an orchard or something like that. It's unlikely these areas are going to be considered garden land, and therefore that would require actually a change of use. It's not to say it's not possible, but it is tricky and it does require that change of use application. So we always sort of recommend keeping it within that existing curtilage.
Yeah, while you're going through that there, Joss, Linda has asked what happens if my plot is not attached to the house and is off grid. That is exactly what I've put in the reply to you there, Linda, that it may be that we need to have a change of use for that land to make it.
That's it. Yeah. So as I say, it's not impossible. It may be that we can extend the residential curtilage, which we have done in a number of cases with sort of iHus clients. But it's just sort of another layer to the application process, I guess. Nigel, if you can move on to the next slide. Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, so a certificate of lawfulness for the siting of a mobile home is another route that we take with iHus applications. Now, many people sort of instantly think, oh, you know, when you think of a mobile home, it's a static home, it's on wheels, but that really isn't the case. And when it comes to an iHus, they're built to such a high standard. It's exactly the standard you would get if it was being built as an annex. Whether you get permission for the annex or the mobile home, they will look exactly the same. What iHus have done is they've designed the annexes to comply with this definition of a mobile home. And the definition includes sort of 3 key tests, which are the size, construction, and the mobility. So in terms of the size, Nigel touched on this earlier, you can actually go to 20 meters by 6.8 meters with an internal ceiling height of 3.05. So that means even if you're building as a mobile home and you want a sort of vaulted ceiling inside, you can still get that nice height internally. Now, the one thing I'd say about the size is, like I mentioned, it has to be ancillary to the main dwelling. So if you've got, you know, if your house may not be particularly large, you know, the bigger annex, the bigger sort of mobile home you go for, they may not consider it as have that ancillary link because it could be sort of a standalone separate dwelling. So that's why it's always good to think about the size and just have it sort of comparative to the size of your house. In terms of the construction, anything with a width of over 4.5 meters is classed as what's called a twin unit mobile home. So that's where the mobile home has to be constructed on site in 2 parts. And the final act of assembly is bring those 2 parts together, and that's where you get the joint line. So Nigel mentioned earlier that when we zoomed in on that picture that there was a very faint sort of joint line. So essentially it looks no different, but there is that joint line in it if it is over 4.5 meters. And you may have seen this sort of happening, you know, half a mobile home going down the motorway, and this is what is classed as a twin unit mobile home. In terms of mobility, we have to show that the mobile home is capable of being moved from site in one piece. Now, what iHus have done is they've got a structural engineer involved to demonstrate how that can happen. They've created this sort of lifting cradle that could lift the annexes. And so we submit that as part of the evidence, as part of the application, and that seems to satisfy the mobility side of things. The other thing is it must be ancillary to the main dwelling and not result in a change of use of land. So this is where if you were applying for an annex through the householder route and you did need to extend that residential curtilage, you could do that within a full planning application. But with a mobile home, it has to be within the residential curtilage already. So you'd have to have sort of a 2-stage process. You'd have to extend the curtilage first, and then you'd have to ask for permission for a lawful development certificate for putting the mobile home there. So that's just one key thing to note here. It must be within that residential curtilage. So why is it important that iHus meet this definition of a mobile home? Well, the courts have said that a mobile home is not considered a building, and therefore it technically doesn't require planning permission as long as it's used in an ancillary way and doesn't result in a change of use. So this is what we demonstrate in our submission. We put all the evidence forward to say, actually, this building can be classed as a mobile home, and therefore it doesn't require planning permission. And that bit of paper with the certificate saying this is lawful just demonstrates that the council agree with that methodology. As I mentioned sort of briefly earlier, certificate of lawfulnesses don't get assessed against sort of local planning policy. So perhaps if you are in a green belt, you may have a listed building. They don't get assessed against local planning policy. So sometimes in those areas of sort of high planning constraint, we find they can be a little bit of an easier route to go down. Because they are sort of a legal application, it's often looked at a legal team at the council rather than a planning officer. So it's more of a yes or no rather than we have to assess this. I think the next, oh, sorry, just going back to that one. One thing to note is that they are, they still take around 8 to 10 weeks. So we do find that it's a similar sort of timescale compared with the householder application.
Another point, just to help you there, Joss. One thing that people are not aware of is our planning guarantee. So what Joss and the team do on our behalf is we go for a dual application. So we apply for both certificate of lawfulness and for standard planning at the same time. And what iHus have is a planning guarantee, excuse me. And that planning guarantee is that when we get to the point where we're moving into a contract and we're getting ready to go into planning, you will pay £4,200 to iHus. That's £2,200 including VAT for the planning applications, engineering drawings, architectural drawings, plans, etc., and the planning fees. And you'll pay £2,000 deposit to iHus to say that we will build the annex after we've finished planning. Now, if we should fail, and with a guarantee, with a success rate of 94%, if we fail to gain planning, and believe me, if these guys can't get planning permission, nobody can, you will have that £4,200 refunded in full. It's literally free planning. So that's our guarantee to our customers, and I'm sure Josh will agree that there's nobody else out there that does such a thing.
I haven't seen it anywhere else, so it's definitely a good thing to have.
Okay.
I touched on this briefly, obviously the planning process. So generally, once you've come up with your design with iHus, they've passed us the documents. We always aim to sort of get applications in within a week of having all the documents ready. And then once it's in with the council, there's a validation period, which can take sort of 1 to 3 weeks, depending on the council and their workloads, essentially. So some you may get the next day, some might be 4 weeks. That's just sort of a average, I'd say. And once it's in, there's that neighbourhood consultation phase, which lasts 3 weeks. Generally, the case officer probably won't pick up the planning application in that time because they like to have all the sort of consultation responses in first before they make any assessment. So it's kind of a quiet period. You probably won't hear much from us in that time period. And then at about 4, maybe 5 weeks, the case officer will go out to site and make a site visit. Now, this is where they'll probably just come to site and take a few photographs, check that it's not impacting on your neighbours in any way, and just sort of start making their assessment on the application. And then that's when we sort of really get in touch with the council and just try and build that relationship with them. And, you know, if they have any issues at that point, we hope they come to us and we can sort of iron out anything as part of the application process, rather than potentially seeing a refusal and then having to go in with a resubmission. We always like to, sort anything out if we can during that process. And then usually at around 8 weeks, we get a decision. Now that's the council's sort of target date for a decision. Sometimes we find that some councils will approve things before that date, and then sometimes it can run over a little bit. But generally, sort of, we always say sort of 10 to 12 weeks, you're looking at reaching a decision on your application. I'll just go on to talk a little bit about a couple of case studies that we've had. So you'll see on the left here, so we had a listed building. Now this picture of the annex actually wasn't what we had originally submitted. Now the council's heritage officer had a few concerns sort of over the design of the building and the impact on the actual listed building. So what we did is we worked with the client, iHus, and the officer to sort of overcome these concerns. So in this case, we sort of raised the pitch of the roof. We used natural tiles on the roof, and we also use that natural timber cladding, which sort of weathers really nicely. I think we also, the windows were sort of a nice greeny colour to match in with the surrounding sort of development. And in the end, obviously the client was happy, the council were happy, and the application got approved. And it's turned into like a really lovely looking building. In the middle there, this is where I said the dual application works really well together. So we had a site that was in the green belt and within the grounds of a grade 2 star listed building. And in this case, you know, if we'd had a standalone householder application going in there, to be honest, it probably would have been refused. But where we had that fallback position of the certificate of lawfulness, the certificate of lawfulness was going to be approved because it was assessed against all the relevant case law and the legal sort of definition of a mobile home, and the council considered it to be lawful. So we sort of fired a lot of case law back at the council and said, you know, look, you're essentially getting the same sort of structure here. You might as well approve the householder application as well. And actually, we managed to get the householder through on that basis. So that's where the dual application can work really nicely together. It's not always the case, but in that authority, it really did work. On the right-hand side here, the neighbour had complained about the height of the annex. Now, they were worried about sort of the overbearingness and a loss of privacy. So again, we worked with the client and iHus to see if the height of the annex could be reduced at all. And actually what we did in the end was we reduced the pitch of the roof, and that reduced the overall height. But I think it was only about sort of 20 centimetres, but the neighbour was happy with that, and so was the council. So we overcame the objection and the application was approved. So that was a really good result there as well. I'll just talk a little bit about sort of council tax. So we're not council tax experts at NAPC, but we do get asked this question quite a lot, so we do know a bit about it. Now, when it comes to annexes, they do trigger the need for council tax. Now, the good news is that whilst every council is a little bit different, generally a reduction of 50% applies on that council tax if you've got a family member living in it. And if that family member is dependent on you, so they might be over the age of 65 or disabled, then you can get a complete exemption of council tax. So I would say it's always worth contacting your local council and having a look. Sometimes they have this information on the council's website, just so you can see what reductions or exemptions may be available to you. I'll just hand back over to Nigel, who'll talk a bit about the build process.
Hi. Okay, so thank you very much for that, Joss. Very important. Now, into the chat, Linda has again asked what other foundations are required. I'll cover it on this point, Linda. So when we hit the build process, it's dead straightforward, but I'm going to go through it a little bit individually. So pre-construction, we come out of planning, and we're now in a position where we're moving forward, and we've given you a build date, and that is when you would, depending on the circumstances of the land where we're going to build, that would be pre-prepared, ready for us to come in with foundations. So groundworks and foundations are coming in week 1. So we have 3 kinds of foundation. We have the hexagonal screw pile, we have the swift plinth, and worst case scenario is a concrete pad. Now, we, as part of our build, we have the foundations within that build structure. So don't worry about, oh, if it's been a concrete pad, it's more expensive. It's irrelevant. It's all part of the process. Now, hexagonal screw piles, they could be a metre deep, they could be 2.5 metres deep, and they could be numerous around the site. With it, the groundworks prior to it, you would have a screw pile test, and the foundations would be sort of down that route through the engineer. So I hope that answers your question there, Linda. Week 2, the superstructure arrives, so we're in a position where we delivered all the materials to build the annex, and the floor cassettes go in, and the substructure goes up, ready for us to continue with the build. As we move into week 3, this is when we have first fix and installation. So all of the insulation that Joss and myself have mentioned to you about being part L recommended and part of the building process and part of building control and code, means that we get all that insulation in there. We get the first fix, means that the power, water, first fixes are to the property. That structure goes, that week goes really quickly. There's a lot of work goes on involved in the erection of the annex at that time. Week 4, we go to plasterboard and plastering. Yes, they are proper plastered walls. A lot of people expect it's going to be like a caravan, so you've got thin aluminium base walls or sheet boarding. No, these are proper plastered walls. Hanging your pictures up is not a problem. Hanging your mirrors and so on and so forth. It is like a new house inside. Then we move on to week 5, which is the second fix. So your bathroom, your kitchen, all of your internal appliances are fitted at that point, and then we decorate throughout. Yeah, because remember, this is a turnkey operation, and that turnkey operation is key to what we do. Week 6, we go on the external works, which is finalising the roof materials, finalising your cladding that goes all the way around the building, whether it's going to be natural timbers, whether it's going to be cement fiberboard, which is the lowest maintenance material that we offer, up to a 50-year guarantee. And then we move into week 7. Now, commissioning and handover. Commissioning, that's when the building control people come in and double check everything has been done correctly, and they will start aligning the sign-off final note certificate, and we'll do a handover with you. So that handover is literally making sure you're conversant with everything inside the annex, how the heating system works, how everything operates, which again, sometimes, you'd be surprised how many people don't quite understand how to work the oven and so on and so forth. So we go quite in depth in that. And then the final build process is the building control final certificate. That's the sign-off sheet, whether it's built under standard planning, whether it's built under the certificate of lawfulness. We build exactly the same way, Same quality of material, same quality of build. So that sign-off sheet then comes to you. So that's a good point to cover. I hope that's helped you there, Linda. So moving on, we're now, I mentioned the Hortons earlier when I said the lady who's started her new life with her family. I'm just going to play you a video. The video interviewer is our brand ambassador, Mr. Tony Blackburn, who we've built an annex for. We built Tony's annex about 7 or 8 years ago now. His mother-in-law is coming up to 100 years old. So not just our ambassador, he's one of our customers too. I'll let you watch this video.
When I found out in 2018 that Jen and Kira were expecting their first baby, I decided I really needed to be closer to them. Before anyone buys an iHus, they need to go and look at one. I went to look at one down in Shropshire, and I burst into tears when I walked into the house, and Roger said to me, "Oh no, she doesn't like it." And I said, "No, I love it." We did get quotes for other things. We didn't just look at iHus, but it was astronomical, the cost of building, just a brick building. Never mind the plumbing, plastering, electrics, all that. The after service of iHus is brilliant, because I had a small little leak in the bathroom and we couldn't work out what it was, and they replaced the toilet straight away. So they come back, they put everything right. It's great. It's the best thing I ever did.
So what would you say to anybody who's thinking of doing this?
Do it. Go for it.
Well, if you want a granny annex for yourself or a loved one, why don't you come and see one? There are 70 show homes in the open house community, so why don't you come and meet the families, have a look round, exactly what I've been doing.
So join me, Tony Blackburn, as I meet families up and down the UK to find out just what makes an iHus annex so special.
Well, openness. That's a very key thing to what we do. We firmly believe that you can't fully understand the true quality and size and overall feel of our annexes without visiting one in person. That's why we're very proud to introduce the unique Openness initiative. Now, Tony mentioned there that we had over 70 show homes throughout the UK. Well, I'm very pleased to tell you that that is now up to 96, and my slide says 89. So we've been very busy over the month of June, and we've got quite a lot of new customers that want to share their homes with you. Our past customers open their annexes doors to anybody who's interested in exploring and learning more about annexes. It's a chance for you to step inside and look around. Ask the questions directly to the people who have experienced the build and are living in these beautiful homes. We are the only annex company capable of offering such a service. And unlike traditional showroom visits where you're accompanied by a representative and they talk you through and walk you through and you feel a little bit pressured, that is not what we're about. We don't want you to feel any pressure at all. We'd rather you talk to the people who've experienced it from hand. So we currently have those 96 open up annexes spread across the UK, so there's always one nearby for you to visit. It's growing, and the community is growing too. You can find your nearest annex by entering your postcode into the Open Us section on the website, or by giving us a call. And if you look on screen now, you can see there's a QR code. If you scan the QR code with your phone, it'll take you directly to that, or jump on the website. Or if not, just give us a tinkle. We'll happily organise a home visit for you. Now it's time to start looking at open questions, but also I'd like to offer you the opportunity of actually speaking one-to-one. That's my good self on a good day. If you'd like to speak to us one-to-one about your project, on the screen you've got my email address and my personal mobile number. My mobile phone is turned off at 10 PM every night, only because I'm told I have to. If you want to talk about planning, there's Joss's email there as well, and the telephone number for Joss at the NAPC. Or simply, once again, just scan the QR code if you know how to scan the QR code. So now we're going to move on to questions. And we have an open question time, so if you'd like to turn on your microphones, you're quite welcome to do so, and be free to ask any questions.
With the power connections to the house, if it's got to come off your house supply,
Yes.
is the house supply got to is that got to come off your main fuse board, or
It does
Yeah.
normally comes off your main fuse board unless you're a three-phase system, sir.
yeah, we are a three-phase system, yeah.
Yeah, then again, it'll come from the main board, depending on how the system is set, and the annex will require a minimum of 60 amps.
Right.
But
Okay.
we do all those connections, and we trail the cable down to the annex.
So regarding, say, because a normal house supply is 100 amp, isn't it? 100 amp supply.
Most house systems are, so yes.
Yeah. With regard heating the annexes, we had no gas. We would look to go for an air source heat pump, possibly.
Well, Richard, a lot of our annexes, and most of them, in fact, nearly all of them, are electrically heated. We have a lot of test cases for the way that we process our heating system. We offer underfloor heating as well as radiator systems. We can offer air pumped heating as well, but we know what's more cost effective and cost efficient. And as Josh has just mentioned to you, our EPC rating is, and especially if you go for a solar package as well, then you're in a position where air source heat pumps are not as efficient as what we supply. So,
right, okay. Okay.
I would recommend that if you would like to have a consultation, a virtual consultation is something that we offer for all our clients, and we can talk about individual basis one-to-one.
Yeah, regarding curtilages and things, I mean, we built two properties on a redundant farm.
Mm-hmm.
So our curtilage is quite large in some respects.
Again, so we look at it on a case-by-case basis.
Yes, that's right. Yes, you would. Yes.
Yeah. So,
would a site visit be appropriate first of all to?
So again, just to reiterate, when we organise a virtual consultation first, like we're doing here on Zoom, yeah. So we book you a virtual consultation. We do all the preliminary work in the background. Joss's team would prepare the preliminary planning report. We look at the overhead views. We look at the plans. There's lots of things that we gather before we start that virtual consultation. Then we need to find out exactly what you require and what your needs are. And from that, we're then in a position where we should be able to provide you with a quote and drawings and to display exactly what you would expect from us. After that, then we would organise a site survey to make sure that we can connect the house to the house and so on and so forth. And as long as you're happy, then we go into planning and build you a lovely new home in the back garden.
Right. Okay.
I was getting Richard, in terms of curtilage, as Nigel said, it's part of our sort of pre-report. We'd look at that and be able to sort of advise what the council would consider to be that curtilage to that dwelling.
The original curtilage was when they drew the original lines around it on the original application that we did. They didn't actually comment on it, and it's quite considerable.
Yeah,
the
usually it's
line. So would they say that would be our admonition to say, well, actually, no, you've never commented on this.
Yeah, that's something that we would need to look on a one-to-one basis for you, Richard.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
If I can cover some questions that have been raised prior to the start of the webinar. This was by a lady called Marilyn. I hope you're enjoying the webinar, Marilyn. Does the iHus range connect utilities such as water, sewage, electric? Yes, that's all part of the build. What is a key point for you there is every annex comes with the first 10 meters of connections as part of the build. If once we go outside 10 meters, there's additional charges there, Marilyn. So what's the typical average cost for a 2-bedroom annex, assuming the annex would be in the garden and reasonably close to the main house? It depends. 2 bedrooms, they start around about the £120,000 mark. I've just done a two-bedroomed one for a lady and gentleman that was £260,000. So it depends on size, depends on what you want in the build, it depends on what we're building it to. But if you look in the brochure, Marilyn, you will certainly find that it gives you the prices down the right-hand side. There is an additional cost if you want to go to a pitch roof and so on and so forth. Different. Again, like Richard's just asked quite a few questions, which is very important to him and his site. That's probably better done as a one-to-one. So if you'd like to book a virtual, you can do on there. Is the structure strong enough to support marble and granite worktops in the kitchen? Definitely is, 100%, Marilyn. We've done quite a lot of those for people. What's the typical average cost of a wet room? Between £1,600 and £3,000. So again, it depends on the size and dimensions that you require. Are pocket doors available? And the answer to that question is also yes. It's something that we discuss in a one-to-one meeting. That's it on the written questions today. So anybody else got some questions that they need to be answered?
Oh, hello, Nigel. It's Quentin Stacey here. Just had a question on the different styles, as it were, and how they would be delivered. You said that they were basically constructed the same, whether it was regarded as a mobile home or as a construction.
That's correct.
So do they actually come in modules?
Yeah,
like pods, if you like, which get linked together so that they can therefore be removed literally on the back of a lorry if needs be. Is that the plan?
Yeah, right. So they arrive as timber cassettes. So we have floor cassettes, which are big solid foundation cassettes. And then we have cassettes for the walls, which have already got the pre-insulation and everything into them. So it's like a very large Meccano set, and it's built from scratch in the garden. It's not pre-built into a building like you see on the motorways. They tend to be lodges or cabins. This is
right.
What we do. And we would construct, if it's built on the certificate of lawfulness, we construct both halves the same degree, and it's normally 4 inches apart. So 4 inches gap down the centre, and then we draw both buildings together and finish it off.
Right. Okay.
From scratch in the garden.
So these cassettes, as you call them,
Yeah, you may have heard of them as SIPs panels. Have you heard of those?
So which panels?
SIPs.
SIPs. I have heard of them. Yeah.
So it's like a SIPs panel, but to a higher degree, sir.
Oh, okay. So do they come on the back of a lorry? That's what I'm really saying to you. So you have the facility to crane them over an existing dwelling, do you, into the back garden?
No, we only need a metre of entrance way into a garden.
Oh, okay, that's not a problem. Yeah,
We can get, if the pathway down the side of the house is over a metre, as long as we've got a metre space, that means we can get a mini digger in there, and we can actually get the panels through there. We actually put them on jockeys and push them through.
Okay. The only other question I've got is that your requirement to link it to the main dwelling. I noticed in some of the photographs there, particularly the one which you went with the mobile home option because of the grade 2 listed, that certainly wasn't linked to the building that I could see. So is this a definite requirement to link it to that house, or only if you go for the full planning?
Just understand the image that you saw a glass tunnel that went to the main build.
Right.
That was to the barn.
No, not to the. I was thinking about the one that looked effectively in the grounds of another building, and it was the one which looked like a mobile home, really, but it was in a grade. I think it said it was grade 2 listed, and there was
the one that you upgraded the wood on, not that one. Yeah. Hang on, go back. It's the one that you had to upgrade the wood on.
I think that one's just a little.
Either one or the middle one. Say the middle one, for example. That's not linked to a dwelling, is it?
No, so I mean, most of the annexes we apply for are detached, self-contained annexes.
Right.
Oh, right.
They're not actually linked sort of physically to a main dwelling.
Oh, I see. Because earlier it sounded like you said they had to be linked.
Yes, the link is actually who's living in the annex.
Oh, right. I see. Not a physical link, but a more.
Right, just to give you a little bit of an uptake on physically linking the buildings together.
Right, I'd like to do that, but I don't think it'd work.
Okay, to attach the building to attach the annex to your current home.
Yeah.
Would incur an extra 20% in cost. It would be a VAT qualifying build. Right. Yeah. Having it detached is ancillary and subservient to the house. It's an extension of your property because a family member is going to be living in it. Right. I'm with you. Okay.
So sorry. So are you saying that the these annexes are
detached,
0 rated for VAT?
That's correct.
All right.
That's interesting.
So the price that we give you is the price that you pay.
Good.
Oh, so it's not a question of paying back VAT.
You don't get a brown envelope 6 weeks later asking for 20%. No.
No. Well, when we built our house, we claimed back the VAT, but that's not that way.
So that's a self-build, and that's
a self-build,
and that's a separate building.
Yeah.
We're going to create an annex to your building, which is literally like an extension. If you're building an extension on the house, you would be creating 1 or 2 bedrooms. Yeah. This way, we're building it separately in the garden.
Yeah.
It's for a family member. No, it's for a family member. And that means that we can build under restricted VAT regulations.
Right. Okay. On the delivery again of the panels, the SIPS panels, you said that there are a maximum of 4 meters.
No, never said that. No.
No, I must have picked it up wrong then. Well, actually, so I thought when you said it was maximum 4 meters, I thought there'd be if you had a 12-meter annex, it'd be 2 joins.
No, to reiterate what Josh said, she said that a mobile dwelling becomes a 2-sectional dwelling if it's more than 4.5 meters in width.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
I see. Yeah,
that's what just we're trying to get across. So you can have a mobile home if it was, for instance, if it was 4 meters by 6 meters, it wouldn't necessarily be in a position to be built in 2 halves because it those constraints. But most of our buildings are bigger than that, so therefore they're built in 2 halves. There is actually another legislation that says it can be built in 3 sections. But what we don't want is 2 joint lines. 1 joint line is quite sufficient.
Yes. Okay. Right.
And if I could just reiterate to you, I want to go back to an image. Right. So if we go centre left, can you see that?
That one there.
The left centre image in front of you?
Yeah.
So if you look from the barn, you can see
there's a join.
There's a polytunnel, yes. It's like a conservatory tunnel. That
Yes.
was fitted after we built.
Oh, right.
That's something
Oh,
that
right.
it's not connected to anywhere. It's a little potting shed.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes,
Okay?
yeah.
And if you come away from that connection, you can just see there's a slight variation in colour of the roof. And you can see
Right.
if you can see, you see the
Oh,
frame
yeah,
at the
yeah.
top?
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can see where the gutter runs down.
Yeah.
There's the join.
Oh, right. Okay.
So you
Oh, I
really
see.
have to stare to find it.
Yes. Yes, I'm not worried about join. That's fine. Yeah. Okay.
Can we answer anybody else's questions?
Any more, did we? Nope.
Well, I do hope you've all enjoyed today's Ask Us. I do hope that you have answered some of the questions you may have. In the coming week, please expect a follow-up call from my colleague Dana and Lydia. They'll be speaking to you whether to see if you want to book a consultation or visit a real annex in the Open Hus range. In the meantime, feel free to reach out to me directly on the numbers that you should have taken the email for a one-to-one chat. If it's just a telephone conversation to start with, we'll book you a consultation. And please, please remember, the consultations, you are not charged anything from iHus. We do not charge you a nickel or a dime until we get to the point where you're signing the contract and going into planning. All of our work that we do for you is at our risk. Nobody on the market can do such a thing. So there you go. If that's it for everyone, I'd like to thank you once again. Have a wonderful day, and fingers crossed England win the European Cup.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Okay,
everyone.
pleasure.
Thanks very much.
More chocolate
you.
and Annexe.
Take care.
Bye.